Sono rimasto stregato. La cerimonia era tradizionale. Abbiamo bevuto il sangue l'uno dell'altro. Abbiamo staccato a morsi la testa.
For some time now, Tim Burton has struggled to reach the same success he enjoyed throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. At his best, Tim Burton has been an idiosyncratic, gothic, and yet commercially friendly director. His earlier films, such as Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, and Sleepy Hollow, and Mars Attacks, often celebrate the strange and unusual, using his gifts for the gothic, brooding, and often stylistic visuals to give a voice to the outsider, the misunderstood, and modernizing old stories.
Live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
One of the most genius examples of this gift was displayed in Tim Burton's 1988 ghostly horror comedy, Beetlejuice, the story of a recently deceased couple played by Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, who were brought back as ghosts, and after watching horror as the Dietz family, Charles, a real estate developer who has suffered a nervous breakdown, his insufferable conceptual artist wife Delia, played by Catherine O'Hara, and their goth daughter Lydia, played by Winona Ryder, buy the couple's beautiful old Connecticut house and begin trying to transform it into a tacky, renovated yuppie home.
I'm here with you. I will live with you in this hellhole, but I must express myself. If you don't let me gut out this house and make it my own, I will go insane and I will take you with me!
At the same time, a malevolent poltergeist named Beetlejuice sees the clueless couple as perfect prey to return to the world of the living, just needing somebody to say his name 3 times so that he could return. Beetlejuice provided a scorching view of the pseudo-creative, status-obsessed, upper-middle-class yuppie culture of the 1980s, bumping up against both a more simple middle-class American life and pushing out earnest outsiders like Lydia. A story of the clash between Gen X kids like Lydia watching their boomer parents consume, obsess, and even break down. Only Lydia, at least at first, has a window into seeing the deceased. Her boomer parents are too narcissistic to see ghosts.
We're here to enjoy the country setting, not to trash the place.
You're right.
Charles, you're lucky the yuppies are buying condos so you can afford what I'm going to have to do to this place.
Beetlejuice also provided a hilarious look at the afterlife, where Tim Burton imagined an endless sprawling bureaucracy of the dead, with the Dietz's performative interior designer / former paranormal researcher friend Otho saying, "It's been said that if you commit suicide, you come back as a civil servant." For some time now, Tim Burton has struggled to connect to the current culture and aesthetic the way he did with films like Beetlejuice. However, we are living in the age of the franchise, and it was inevitable that people would eventually clamor for a sequel. And so, on September 6, 2024, Tim Burton released Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. This film has different screenwriters from the original Michael McDowell and Larry Wilson screenplay. Michael McDowell would have to be reached in the afterlife, and Larry Wilson is a producer on the sequel. It was written by Miles Millar and Alfred Goh, the team behind Smallville and Into the Badlands, as well as the Tim Burton-helmed Addams Family adaptation Wednesday. Since we are now at the time when Gen X kids are raising children of their own, Lydia now has a child, Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega, who she struggles to connect with as she tries to navigate her career as a talk show host on a paranormal show called Ghost House. The show is produced by her absolutely insufferable boyfriend, Rory. Lydia is using her ability to see and speak to ghosts to make reality TV.
I know this is a big step for you, but in the words of Dr. Glickman, I'm going to give you the push you need. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
The action of the film begins when Lydia gets a phone call from an overwrought Delia, telling her that her father, who was played by Jeffrey Jones in the original, has died from a plane wreck, botched rescue, and then shark attack. Jeffrey Jones is now a registered sex offender for soliciting a minor for nude pictures. Honestly, one of the funniest recurring bits in the movie is that Charles Dietz is constantly disrespected and Jeffrey Jones isn't even in the movie. I think a question of how do we handle these disgraced figures is really hilariously handled here. After being bitten by a shark, Charles is left to wander the afterlife as a pair of legs and half a torso. Delia calls up Lydia to have an artistic grief collective conceptual exhibit for Charles's death. Lydia and Delia must then pick up Astrid from school. Astrid is already mortified about her family, especially her mom's belief in ghosts, which mirrors Lydia being mortified about her own family in the original. The original Beetlejuice has a kind of Spartan simplicity, an understanding that nothing will fundamentally alter the Dietz family, at least not in a way which makes Charles and Delia less overwrought and insufferable. Nonetheless, everyone can learn to live together in this house, the original ghost house. One thing that I do think Beetlejuice Beetlejuice does correctly is that it aims to build emotionally on the relationship between Lydia and Astrid, and even her stepmother Delia. However, to add a layer of emotional resolution, it has to scale back on the level of contempt that Tim Burton originally had for this yuppie culture and for really many of the characters in the original.
Hey, where are we? I don't know. Hey, that's Saturn. Right, so we must be on one of its moons. I swear the afterlife is so random.
Of course, the film realizes it's doing some of this and then feels the need to poke fun at itself through meta-commentary about psychobabble and therapy speak. When Beetlejuice returns, he's in the guise of a relationship counselor.
Beetlejuice! First of all, I want you two kids to know this is a safe space, okay? Feel free to express yourself. Don't be afraid. I sense there's an enabler here, but we'll get to that.
Even Delia, who is a complete nightmare of insufferable nervous energy in the first one, is scaled down by a lot, becoming a sympathetic and pretty sad character.
Why? No!
Serena, what's wrong?
Oh, I'm trying to capture the perfect primal scream. I'm going to blow it up, mount it on the wall, and I invite all of you to do the same.
Why?
For the collective.
Despite being finally handed success with her so-called art, her insufferable performative outbursts are now kind of just funny and sort of quaint. But maybe that's also growing up. The stepmother figure who felt so oppressive to a teenager mellows out and as their influence becomes less permanent. Maybe it's a personal thing. As someone who grew up so close to New York City, the character of Delia just felt like such a familiar archetype in the original Beetlejuice. The controlling, insufferable, self-proclaimed artist whose rich real estate developer husband is the only reason she's able to keep the dream alive. Which kind of makes me sad that I felt sympathetic to her in this one. I hated her so much in the first one, she kind of feels like a 30 Rock version of herself. In the original movie, her drive to completely gut and remodel this poor old house renders her practically the villain of the whole movie. Catherine O'Hara is still so good at playing this role, she steps into it so flawlessly. The relationship between Lydia and Astrid makes up the backbone of the emotional core of this film. Lydia's experience with Beetlejuice and her runaway paranormal TV career has created emotional distance between her and her daughter. And her inability to communicate with Astrid's deceased father means Astrid does not believe in her mother's gifts. Things take a dark turn when Astrid meets a boy who is seemingly trapped in the 90s, and who ends up being a murder ghost bent on dragging Astrid down to the afterlife. This sets up another reason for somebody to say Beetlejuice's name 3 times.
You gotta get me in there so I can get her out.
Well, I can get you in, but it's a quid pro quo.
Of course there is. What do you want?
I've got this ex-wife, you know? She's kind of a whack job, first of all. We're through. She's kind of clingy. So I could just get away from her permanently.
You want me to marry?
But you'd never ask.
Beetlejuice continues to have problems of his own. His ex-wife, played by Tim Burton's new girlfriend, Monica Bellucci, a literal soul sucker, has been able to sew the pieces of her body back together in a classic Tim Burton sequence, and is now out to kill Beetlejuice by sucking out his soul.
My ex-wife is back. Well, I know what you're thinking. When was the juice ever tied down? What kind of woman could ever keep him satisfied? Well,
Te lo dirò.
The afterlife is not just an endless bureaucratic maze in this movie, which does it credit. Willem Dafoe plays a ghost detective named Wolf Jackson who is hunting down Beetlejuice's ex-wife. We also get a cameo from Danny DeVito as a janitor who drank varnish and is now cleaning the afterlife. The universe of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is definitely more expansive. Although nostalgia is part of the appeal, I will give it credit for further exploring this world. There are some very funny moments throughout this movie, and the death waiting room continues to show funny and creative ways that ghosts have died. There's also a literal soul train that takes souls to the afterlife. I could watch an entire movie just showing all of these different rooms and doors that ghosts walk through. If nothing else, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is a fun time at the movies that does understand the appeal of the original one and attempts to build on that 36 years after the original.
How do I know that you're gonna keep your word?
I swear on my dead mother's soul. Yes. Bob, you and the boys stand guard.